We're back in session. It looks like we're still waiting for some members to have a, oh, here's, sorry, let me read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, we're back in session. We have a quorum. We're in the second reading file. No, I mean, sorry, we're in motions. We're in motions, so. In motions, Senator Rodriguez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to add Bill 380-34 in the session agenda.
Senator, could you please read the title?
Okay, let me just grab it. Madam Speaker, Bill 380 is relative to exempting from criminal and civil penalties those engaged in the home cultivation of medical cannabis and extending prohibition, restrictions, and limitations over the same.
On the motion to place Bill number 380-34 on the second reading file, is there any objection? Objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries. Senator Atta, you are recognized. Under motions?
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I move to place on the session agenda Bill number 357-34 COR as introduced. It is an act to authorize Himagalahing Guahan to exchange 324 square meters of lot 12-2 REM in the municipality of Agana Heights. This is government of Guam land with 324 square meters of lot 12-9 REM-R4 in the municipality of Agana Heights. This is private land to correct an encroachment by the Agana Heights Sports and Recreational Facility.
That's Bill number 357. There's a motion to place Bill number 357-34 on the second reading. Is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the last bill is Bill number 376-34 COR as introduced. It's an act to authorize Himagalahing Guahan to sell the remainder portion of Government of Guam Lot 12-2 REM in the municipality of Agana Heights.
On the motion to place Bill number 376-34 on the second reading file, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries. Senator San Augustine, you're recognized under motions.
Madam Speaker, I ask that we're able to place Bill 361-34, an act to voluntary zone C commercial, the strip of land east of Route 1 Jigo from Jigo Catholic Church to tract 9210, municipality of Jigo. Madam Speaker, this bill was replaced by another bill, and if we could just put it back on the agenda so we can discuss that.
On the motion to place Bill number 361, rezoning, on the second reading folder, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries. We're now on the second reading folder, Bill number 350. Senator Rodriguez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my motion is to place Bill 350 as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication on the third reading, and that we resolve into the Committee of the Whole, perhaps at 3:30 p.m. today. to be able to address this measure. But in the meantime, if we can go through the other bills, if that's okay with you and the body, just so that with enough time we can inform the agency directors that I would like to invite for the committee of the whole, if it's approved by this body, to be able to be here.
Which committee did this bill come out of?
A committee on appropriations.
All right, so could you clarify your motion as to who would head the committee of the whole and which people would be invited?
Sure.
So that we have that on the record.
Okay, sure. Well, the chair of the committee, Senator Tom Atta, and I would like to propose that we invite the directors of EPA, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, BBMR, a representative from the Attorney General, and as well as a representative from Cocoa Recycling, preferably their attorney of record. And that is Attorney Fred Harecki.
Can you repeat the panel, please, for the clerk?
EPA Director, BBMR, Chamorro Land Trust Commission, a representative from the Attorney General's office, and a representative from Cocoa Recycling, Attorney Fred Harecki.
On the motion to, could you restate the time also, Senator?
I propose at 3:30, just to give enough time for those individuals to prepare to come down.
All right, the motion is to recess and resume in the committee of the whole at 3:30 with these members on the panel, the representative from the Attorney General, BBMR, Cocoa Recycling, namely Attorney Fred Harecki from the Guam EPA, from the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, and the committee of the whole to be headed by Senator Atta.
That's right.
On that motion, Senator Nicholas?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If I may suggest, because we're looking at rounding up a variety of individuals, if we could instead have the motion be for us to go into the committee of the whole for the purposes of entertaining that bill, and in the interim, as we're trying to bring together those parties, proceed to the next remaining items on the second reading file, and then suspend those items when those individuals become available. That way we're not going to be just having idle time in the session, Madam Speaker, if the author will yield.
And yes, Madam Speaker, that was my intention, just so that we can continue with the work that we
And
have
give
here.
them a definite time to
That's
be
right.
here. All right, so on the motion is to recess and resume, sorry, it's not to recess. You're amending your motion, Senator? All right,
Yes, it's not to recess, it's
Okay.
just to go in the committee of the whole at that time.
all right.
In the meantime, to continue the second reading, the items on second reading.
All right, the motion is to pass on file Bill number 350-34 and resume at 3:30 on this bill, or as close to there as possible, depending where we are at with another bill, for the purposes of committee of the whole, and resume in committee of the whole at that time. On that motion, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries. We are now on the second reading, Bill number 369-34. Senator Atta, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to place Bill 369-34 COR as amended by the Committee on Environment, Land, Agriculture, and Procurement Reform, and I'd like to speak on it.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, the Bill 369 is an act to authorize the sale of 442 plus or minus square meters portion of the old De La Corte Street and alley in Old Agana. Being passed out now is a graphic which should orientate everyone to this property that we're talking about. So on the first page of what's being handed out, it is a colored aerial graphic. And on the left side, you will see an area that is bounded by a yellow marker. And there's an arrow identifying that as bill number 369-34. That is the portion of De La Corte, the old De La Corte street, which the Bill 369 is proposing to authorize the sale of. Just a little bit of context. The area that's bounded in green is a lot that's owned by Jones and Guerrero. And so by allowing the sale or the purchase of that 442 square meters, it allows that owner of that property to basically have one large lot that is not divided by this public easement. Now, just I believe it was one or two sessions ago, we did something similar down on the far right there in that area that's bounded by the red border. That was also the extension of De La Corte Street, and we went ahead and the legislature passed that bill, and it has since been enacted into law. Back in the 16th legislature, just to the west of that red bounded portion of De La Corte Street, that is also an extension of the old De La Corte, and it was sold to the private property owner there. So, you know, the selling of De La Corte Street to make the adjoining lots more usable certainly has had its precedence back since the 16th legislature. So that essentially is what Bill 369-34 is about. On the second page, it gives you a clearer picture without all the colors and the other detail of to the east of the area that we're talking about. So that gives you a little bit more clarity. Of course, the standard requirements for appraisals remains. The proceeds of the sale will be deposited in the Chamorro Land Trust Survey and Infrastructure Fund for the use for that specific purpose is to survey Chamorro Land Trust property. And of course, once this transaction is completed, a consolidated map, of course, will be obtained and registered with the Department of Land Management. So that, Madam Speaker, is the gist of Bill 369-34.
On the bill, Bill number 369, is there any senator who would like to be recognized? Senator San Nicolas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this legislation. If we look at the aerial map of the various color codes of the component parts of this De La Corte Street that's been part of what's been holding back development in this area, we can already see that there's been remedy in Public Law 34-134, Public Law 16-92. This is the last component of that De La Corte Street along that whole strip in Hagåtña that needs to be remedied. And I fully support, again, for the same reasons as I have in the past, the authorization for the adjacent landowners to acquire this lot so they can make full use of the property. This is, again, similar to the other properties in the area, a very nice location that unfortunately is commercially held back by this parcel that is right in the middle of their adjacent properties. By passing this legislation and allowing for this parcel to be acquired, we'll be able to develop the area, create jobs, and now that that whole section there will be remedied, I'm excited of what the next decade is going to hold for the area, for job creation there, and hopefully we can create some new attractions for our visitors to help bolster our tourism industry. So I rise in support of the legislation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the bill? Bill number 369-34? Senator Lee, were you raising your hand? No. Senator Esteves? Oh,
Madam Speaker, I request that we take a brief recess so we can see the bill. And I'm also, since I'm up here, maybe perhaps we can, was there an economic impact survey done to show that it would create jobs for the
All right,
acquisition of this piece of property?
we'll take a minute for recess. I was assured that copies had been passed out. There are not copies in your files, your folders, the second reading blue folders. All right, we're going to take a 1-minute recess.
Mic check. The legislature is back in session. Senator Esteves, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand in opposition to this measure as I have for all other land sale measures. I still believe that we shouldn't be giving up at a low cost government assets, real property that have a direct impact to the overall value and liquidity of the government of Guam. That's directly tied to our debt ceiling. You know, I've had plenty of arguments thinking this over, and there was one that I haven't, with similar measures, and there's one that I haven't brought up yet, and I'm surprised I didn't think about it. We focus so much on the here and now, and I don't believe we do a good job of thinking about the future. Looking at the map, and I always appreciate the graphics provided, and you look at the other public laws that provided these government tracts of land to the adjacent landowners, you see that these contiguous lots have not, I haven't seen any proposal to combine them. How could, I'm trying to think of a nice word, but how could we be so daft not to consider the possibility that the current owner might not own all of these lots in the future? Then you know what's going to happen? We're going to be buying this land back to provide an easement for the private property owners. We've started going down this road of selling these little tracts of land, these easements that protect the lot because the owner owns all the surrounding lots, but we're not thinking about the future. And we're setting a precedent that we can just start selling off all the easements with the assumption that these lands could never be contested, these lots never could be divided, they could never potentially have different owners, because they're still different lots. They're still outlined as different lots. And so we're not doing a good job of considering the potential impact. These are family properties too. We've seen it happen on Guam. The well-to-do families are not better off, I think, in terms of the arguments. When parents die, grandparents die, land gets split up, these potentially cause divides in families. And we could very well see that these lots get subdivided, get divided, get parceled out in a contentious estate hearing and estate proceedings. So what are we doing selling these easements? I mean, it's clear if you look at the map. Yes, it makes sense. If I own, Senator Esteves, if I own all of these lots, it makes sense that I own this easement because I'm the only one that's going to use it. But the one thing that's guaranteed is we're not going to be here forever. I can't guarantee necessarily what's going to happen after I'm gone, even with the will. And I can't guarantee what my children or grandchildren are going to do. And I'll tell you, purchasing these plots of land or selling them for $23,000 today at a lower estimate or a median, whatever we take, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, they're not going to be worth $23,000. They're going to be worth more, and that is the value of real property. So every time we say that they're not useful, they're not valuable, they're only valuable to this adjacent landowner, we're not considering the possibility. These titles are for life, but they get passed down to people or corporations. It's fluid. It's not always the same. And if we're not considering the potential that we would have to purchase these easements back, we're not being good financial stewards of the money today and the money tomorrow. And I believe that in this body, we have a responsibility not only to consider the fiscal impacts of today, but the fiscal impacts of future generation, even up to now, because of the way some of the land has been done, some of the zoning, some of the infrastructure. Even up to now, many things in terms of infrastructure and capital improvement can't happen because the government is trying to buy rights of way. That's why we can't see roads get done on Route 4. We're trying to get easements for utilities. And here we are selling good public easements because right now it seems like the right idea, but we're not considering about the future. If anybody out there can guarantee that the landowner is going to own these forever without a single chance that anybody can own any other plots or lots within this area, then fine. But nobody can provide that guarantee. Nobody could provide a guarantee that a company could sell their assets, go out of business, file for bankruptcy, be forced to liquidate. Nobody can guarantee that can't happen. It can happen to the biggest company, it can happen to the smallest company. No one can guarantee that there won't be a family dispute on how land is parceled out, or a probate case on an estate. And then it becomes our responsibility again, and I know I'm beating a dead horse, but then it becomes our responsibility again to provide the government easement, because that is our responsibility as a government, to provide these accesses to private landowners. That is our main function. And so when we sell it for a quick buck, you know, there might be other things that we can do if we start taking a better approach with forward thinking. You know, now that I've been thinking about it, I'm dismayed, and this is in myself, Madam Speaker, that I haven't considered an amendment requiring a timeline for them to combine these lots. But as long as these lots remain individually owned or individually parceled out, even though they have a single owner, we need to be considering that we have to provide an easement for all those lots, regardless of who owns it. And so this, with every other measure, I think it's very short-sighted. I think whenever we give up real property, it's to the detriment of the future. If we fail to consider all of the implications, because even with this measure, we're giving property away at a steal for no other reason than we did it for two others. This is the trend that's going to start. Next thing you know, we're selling little plots of land all over the island for a steal to contiguous landowners. And we can't guarantee that not a single one of them will potentially have those lots divvied out in the future. And so yes, $23,000 today could probably cost the government maybe $100,000 15 years from now. And so we need to start thinking about these things, Madam Speaker. We need to start projecting. We need to start forecasting the potential impact of getting rid of land, government land, easements. And so with that, I do stand in objection with this measure and other similar measures on what they propose to do, for all the reasons stated before and the new reasons stated today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Mrs. Masi, Senator. On the main motion, any other senator wish to be heard? Senator Torres, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I stand in support of Bill 369-34. I'm one of the fortunate people that has a parent who actually lived in this area. And from my mother's recollection and the stories that she tells me, she probably lived right across from the old Delacorte Street, the access road. But, you know, fast forward to where we are today, where after World War II, when Agana was devastated and bombed, the federal government came and put down a grid system over Agana, which essentially distorted what was once the lay of the land, where private homes lined certain areas, and there were different districts and barrios, so to speak, where our parents and ancestors lived. But that said, it only makes sense now that when you have situations like this where there are slivers in between what is an established grid in modern day, where it becomes an impediment to appreciating the full value and potential for development, that we correct these little inconsistencies in what would be a logical plan for development. And so I stand in support of that, because this is really a tidying up type of measure if you were to consider what exactly we're trying to do by selling these little remnants of an old access road. or actually an old street in pre-war Agana. But I also support the bill because we are now looking at, and we have been looking for several years at the rehabilitation and redevelopment of Hagåtña, to restoring it to a grandeur that is fitting for a capital city. And we can't do that unless we start to take away what are barriers to optimal development of land. Easement is very clear that there is adequate easement here. And where there is an issue where the government absolutely feels that they need to establish easement, the government has the power to condemn and to take eminent domain where it's in the best interest of the public good. So I don't think that we're shortchanging ourselves. I think if anything, we're just providing a good, sensible opportunity where the proceeds from this can also go into another program that will have another type of benefit to the community. So I stand in full support, and I think that, you know, notwithstanding many, many years later, I do recall the stories and I do recall the situations that led us to now entertaining this type of legislation. And it's sound and it's good policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Torres. On the main motion, any other member wish to be heard? Acting Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the intent of this bill and the requests of the landowners to purchase this bull cart trail. It's a reasonable request to purchase the government land that separates two parcels of your land. And in this case, this is a very valuable transaction for these landowners because it would connect land along Route 1 with land adjacent to the ocean. And I hope we can all appreciate the value of connecting your non-ocean land to the ocean. And so it's going to make a very ideal location for this property after this transaction. So I appreciate the landowner's request and the intention of the author of this bill. But my duty here as a senator, I feel, is to always look at this transaction as to how it would benefit the people of Guam, all the people of Guam, not just this one particular landowner, and whether we are getting for the people of Guam what they deserve and what they are entitled to. So I had a couple issues. So one issue that I have is that on the maps that's been provided to us, it's clear that there was the old bull cart trail. And in prior laws, in the 16th Guam Legislature, one parcel was given away to the Moylan's, I understand. And earlier, during this 34th Guam Legislature term, one parcel was given away to the Calvos of this bull cart trail.
Point of information, Madam Speaker. They weren't given away. They were sold.
All right, they were sold. The government gave over the authority to sell these properties to these people. And so now this bill would sell this property to this bull cart trail to J&G, but there's one portion of bull cart trail that is left on the maps that we've been provided, and I'm just curious which family are the adjacent landowners on this remaining remnant of bull cart trail after this transaction takes place, and if the author would yield to that information, because there's one more bull cart trail remnant in this portion of Hagåtña, which is it's right next to the Guam Seal, pretty much, and going towards East Agana. And so whether the lot in the back and the lot in the front of the bull cart trail are owned by the same person, and if we know who those owners are.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. Senator Atta, do you yield to the question?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, well, since lot 1004, 1005, the one on the west, you know, that was not part of the bill, so admittedly, I did not inquire as to who these lot owners were. I would have if those lots were contiguous to the portion that is being sold, but they are not. So I've got staff that's checking with land management. I don't know if they can get back, but regardless, I don't know that knowing who owns lot 1004, and I'm referring to this graphic on the second page, is really relevant because their property is not contiguous to the portion that's to be sold.
Thank you, Senator. Acting Speaker, does that address your concern?
Thank you very much. Thank you to the sponsor of the bill. So I would just like to point out that we are taking care of remnants of Bull Cart Trail, but there remains one remnant in this same location with owners of the land that are adjacent who are unknown, and I don't know, I'm just, I would feel more comfortable if we knew who those were, and perhaps they have not requested the same transaction because they're not aware of these transactions that have occurred with these other landowners, or I'm just not sure. But, and then one more question is on the other map that we have, there's a blue portion on the, it's called the portion of Delacorte, it's done by Dueñas and Camacho and Associates. It's like sketch map. And I just want to know this, there's an alley that's pointed to in blue. Is the alley part of this transaction, or who owns the alley right now?
This is a question for the sponsor.
Yes, please. Yes, please. If you would yield.
Senator Ada, do you yield to the question? So there's a portion of the sketch map indicated in blue.
Yes, Madam Speaker. So if you see in the title of the bill, of course, and we talk about the Delacorte Street and Alley. So yeah, the alley is part of, so if you look at page 2, Exhibit A depicts the boundaries of approximately 440, page 2, line 15, approximately 442 square meters abandoned portion of the old Delacorte Street and connected alley to be purchased by the owner of the contiguous lot. So yes, that alley that's bounded by the blue lines is part of this sale.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, thank you. Yes, I'm asking because the alley is what connects the Bull Cart Trail to Route 1. And, all right, so that's, that will be included. All right. My main issue with this bill, Madam Speaker, is that this bill is, you know, being prioritized at the end of our session as you know, a transaction that is necessary. What I feel like we have very many transactions that the government needs to take part in that still remain outstanding. Earlier in our session, we were trying to bring some justice for one property owner, for example, in Agatna, whose property had been condemned years ago. And we had not, and there was no plan really to come up with the money to meet the judgment in that case. And so this is why, you know, I agree with the previous speaker that these properties are valuable, because if we can get value out of them, we are going to be able to take care of some of these long-standing issues, condemnations from, you know, Route 4 all the way down to Maritzo, the Agatna lots that are still not resolved, and condemnation, inverse condemnations. I think there are also, we've seen with the Chamorro Land Trust property, that requests by utility agencies to use Chamorro Land Trust properties, that there are still outstanding infrastructure and utility needs by the government that that our property, the government's property, is very valuable for those purposes as well. For this reason, Madam Speaker, I would request that the legislature, at the very least, because we are representing the people of Guam and in our capacities today, that we allow and give to the Department of Land Management the necessary tools to get for the government the value that this property is worth and the maximum value that it can get. And if we're going to be selling off properties, that should be what our goal is. If our goal is to get cash, then we should get as much cash as possible. If that's the benefit to the people of Guam, is because we're going to get cash, then we should get the maximum cash. And we know from the 2 appraisals, the public law that requires that 2 appraisals be before the legislature was so that we could make a decision as to what is really the best value for the government in this transaction. And so I would propose that with the 2 appraisals in front of us, and these appraisals, I would note, were both done by the landowner. None of them was done by the government side, the seller in this case, only by the buyer. So these 2 appraisals are different in about $20,000, I think, approximately. Yes, about $20,000. So I would make a motion to pass this amendment that adds on, for sales authorized by this act, the Department of Land Management shall negotiate for the government of Guam the highest amount possible, which shall not be less than the highest appraisal. And that would bring in at least $10,000 more for this transaction. And if, as I said before, if cash is our goal, then I think we should get cash. And I see no reason why we shouldn't go with the highest appraisal. If this is really going to, if there's portions of their property that they are not able to use without this transaction, then I think it's an easy deal for the government to demand a little bit more. We have another transaction where they proposed that they would give the government twice the value of the property. That's how much they really wanted to purchase the property. But so I disagree with going for, this almost a lower amount that we are settling for. I think we can get much more for the government of Guam, for the people of Guam. In this case, the money is going to go to the Chamorro Land Trust Survey and Revolving Fund, and that if we can get more cash, then we should. And I think that that's reasonable. It's not unfair because the property's been appraised at that value. And so that would be my amendment, Madam Speaker. It's been passed out.
Mrs. Osmasi, Acting Speaker, do all members have a copy of the Terlahi Amendment to page 3, line 8 of the bill? Any member wish to be heard on this amendment to Section 4? Senator Atta, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have no problems with this. I think this is fine. I would ask, though, if the mover of the amendment will clarify the language here that says the government shall negotiate for the government of Guam the highest amount possible, which shall not be less than the highest appraisal. So when I read that, it suggests to me that the highest appraised amount will be the starting point for negotiation. So right now, for this particular portion of property, there's been 2 appraisals, one for $103,000 and the other one for $120,000. So the way this amendment is being written, is it intended then that we start negotiating from the 120 level and see how much more we can get? Or are we saying that we should negotiate for the highest appraised value? So if the author would kindly explain.
Thank you, Senator Atta. Acting Speaker, do you yield?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the question. It does leave in the hands of the Department of Land Management, who's in charge, according to this bill, with this entire transaction, and it's an executive branch function. It would put in their hands, or the director's hands, the negotiations, which yes, they pretty much need to start off with the highest appraisal. That's the minimum that, according to this amendment, would be allowed. And if they can get more, then all the better for the people of Guam.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. Senator Ada? Senator Ada? On the Terlahi Amendment, any other member wish to be heard? Senator St. Nicholas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we've entertained this amendment on previous bills during this session, and in those previous instances, this amendment did not move forward. And the rationale was that this amendment creates a different method by which the valuation of the transaction is to be determined and applied. And what's particularly concerning is that in this particular transaction, when we look at the aerial map and the colored portions therein, Public Law 34-134 in the red section there was just passed by this body. And the valuation to be determined and negotiated on that particular parcel was not based on what this new amendment is seeking to impose. And I made the statement earlier in previous measures that if we want to change the way the government is going to be determining the sale price, then let's change that section of the statute. I find it very dangerous to just apply a certain interpretation of the statute in a case-by-case basis, because then we open up the door for there to be unfairness. And in this case, it will be quite blatant that the parties interested in settling the De La Corte Street in Bill number 369-34 are going to be held to a different transactional standard than the parties who settled their De La Corte transaction in Public Law 34-134, both in the same legislative session. We're creating two standards for settling the same easement. And you know, in the interest of fairness, I'm very big on that. I think that the law just needs to be applied the same way. And if we want to change the way the law is applied, then going forward, that's what we should do by amending the section in the law that has been the governing language in these kind of transactions up to this point. If we change it going forward, then you know we can say that it's going to be fairly applied to everybody going forward. But what happens if we apply it in this instance this way, and then the next land bill that we deal with, you know, we apply it in a different way? In a hearing the other night, one of the parties interested in making an acquisition for the record made an offer greater than what is in statute. And that's a different circumstance altogether. They're making the offer greater than what's in statute. And I'm all for taking advantage of that. But in instances when we don't have that, that expressed offer from the interested parties, it behooves this government to apply as fair and equitable a standard as possible, especially when we've done so in the very same legislature, on the very same easement, under the exact same circumstances. So in the interest of fairness to the parties involved in this transaction, and in the interest of these transactions being what I would say are mirror transactions, I would prefer that we mirror the same valuation, and do so by not adopting this amendment, which would change the standard by which we determine the sale price for the same strip. This is exactly this is a precise example, Madam Speaker, of why I think the actual underlying law needs to be changed, because otherwise, I mean, that's really unfair. That one group is going to pay a higher amount than another group, all because one group was able to not have it added to their bill, while this group is going to be put into a different set of circumstances. So I prefer fair transactions, and that's why I would have to object to this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senators, there's been an objection to the Terlahi Amendment. Any other member wish to be heard on the Terlahi Amendment? Any other member wish to be heard? If not, Acting Speaker, you're welcome. Oh, Senator Ada. You're recognized.
Madam Speaker, I know I spoke on, because I had an inquiry, but I would like to make an amendment to the amendment. And so that the amendment reads that the Department of Land Management shall accept the highest appraisal. So in other words, the services of appraisers are engaged, and whichever is the highest, that will be the selling price, as opposed to using that highest appraisal as the starting point for further negotiations. So that would be my amendment, Madam Speaker, on the second line there of the new language, to strike out the words negotiate, that whole second line, and then so that it reads, Department of Land Management shall accept the highest appraisal. And this recognizes the fact that the law is not prescriptive with respect to how to evaluate the sale of the land. It says that you may use the average of two appraisals. In this case, we're then prescribing that it should be that land management will accept the highest appraisal. So that's my amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Atta. On the Atta amendment to the Terlahi amendment, any member wish to be heard? And just to clarify, the Atta amendment would read, for sales authorized by this act, the Department of Land Management shall accept the highest appraisal. Any objection to the Atta amendment? Acting Speaker, you're recognized.
Yes, I want to acknowledge the sponsor's reading of the statute that says that these appraisals coming to us are for our use, not that we are mandated to stick to those values. In fact, there have been many land transactions where the legislature has reviewed the terms of leases and added on provisions or restrictions and done the same for land transactions. And that's the purpose of these land transactions being reviewed by the legislature. And I guess I would just like to see if, because these two appraisals were done by the buyers and not by the government of Guam or by someone who's looking out for the interests of the government of Guam, and this property is going to be removed from our tax rolls, from our ability to count it as part of land for borrowing purposes. I think there's still value to that might be added, and because this is going to connect these parcels, like I said earlier, to the ocean. Some of these parcels are just small fractions of lots that are along Marine Drive, but they don't connect at all to the back lot or to the ocean. So I'm hoping that the Department of Land Management is going to be able to get a little bit more. And I think we have other transactions where they're going to give the lease amount, but they're also going to give some services in kind down in PD. I mean, there's just been different transactions all over that I think set precedent that it's reasonable for the government of Guam to ask for more.
So, Acting Speaker, is that an objection to there's been an objection to the Atta amendment, to the Terlahi amendment. Any other member wish to be heard? If not, all those in favor of the Atta amendment to add the words shall accept the highest appraisal and end it there, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Amendment fails. Senator Atta, you're recognized. On the Terlahi amendment, any member wish to be heard? If not, Acting Speaker, you're welcome to close on your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, I would just like to read for the record what the statute that's been referred to here in this bill. It says that, and in this amendment, is the language of the bill says, 2 GCA 2107B relative to appraisals of land shall apply to this act. 2 GCA 2107B says that no such bill authorizing the transfer of land or leasing of land may be considered by the legislature on third reading unless accompanied by 2 appraisals on all land concerned, appraised for highest and best use regardless of zoning from 2 separate licensed real estate appraisers, one of which appraisals is not more than 12 months old, and which appraisals are paid for by the transferee. If the transferee is the government of Guam by virtue of exercising its eminent domain power or similar action for specific and identified public benefit, the appraisals, survey maps, and recordation shall be paid by the government of Guam. This is not the case in this transaction, Madam Speaker. The private land owner shall sign a statement that the person agrees that his paying for the appraisals does not in any way obligate the legislature nor the government of Guam to approve the transfer. One of the appraisers shall be selected by the Department of Land Management and the other by the private landowner. The average of the 2 appraisals may be used by the legislature as a value for the transfer of trade. And so I'm glad that we have the appraisals in front of us, and so that we can use that as the minimum value that we should get for this transaction. Sidus Masi.
Sidus Masi. On the Terlahi Amendment, there's been an objection. All those in favor of the Terlahi Amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. Amendment fails. Acting Speaker, you're recognized.
I guess I just want to close with the notion of fairness, Madam Speaker, and for this transaction to be described as something that would bring fairness is I think a misstatement of really our history and our role as in the legislature in dealing with land transactions. If we do not have a policy set in place right now that is the policy of the government of Guam to sell as much land as possible to get cash, even if it's to put it into the surveying fund, that's not a policy that's our priority. We have so many other policies that have been passed into law that have been recognized over years and years by the people of Guam as our priorities to take care of, especially when it comes to land. And this, I would say, is one of the lowest priorities. It's a commercial transaction. It's going to benefit one party in a commercial transaction who purchased land that had these old boot car trails in the middle of it. Now, like I said, I sympathize with the owners and why they would want this, and especially for commercial property. Who wouldn't want that? We would all want that. But I'm just saying whether it's our obligation to give it to them as cheap as some other legislature or even this legislature gave some other landowner, that's not a standard, I think, that we should have to follow. That because one legislature gave a great deal to one special interest does not, or that our legislature gave a great deal to one special interest does not put on us that we have to give all special interests that same great deal. In fact, I think it's the opposite, Madam Speaker, that it's unfair to the people of Guam. And that if we are able to get more in these transactions, that's what we should try to do. Now, if the Department of Land Management came back and said, sorry, I could only get, that higher appraisal, I would find that reasonable, just depending, who that is and what their efforts were. But we have to trust the executive branch in transactions of this type. However, I just still don't believe that these are the priority of the people of Guam, and that, we've been, I think, very accommodating, trying to ensure that senators who may be leaving the legislature are able to have bills heard, and property owners who may need these types of favors from the government. That I'm open to hearing all of this, but I I just don't think that it's proper that it should be referred to that this is something that's required for fairness. Fairness is compensating those people in Agatna whose land were condemned, who we have not compensated for years. Years. Compensating the people along Route 4 whose land we use for roads every single day. We've not compensated them. These are, in many cases, oceanfront property taken by the government of Guam. And I think we should be finding ways to take care of those things and prioritizing those over some of these other transactions that are being come before us. And especially in this case, I'm curious that there's one landowner. It's very apparent to me after this 34th Guam Legislature is done who's not been included in these types of transaction, who also is suffering the same fate of having land that a bull cart trail might run through, or that bull cart trail is adjacent to, that prevents him from connecting to, that landowner from connecting to Route 1 or being landlocked. So I'm curious about that, Madam Speaker. And I'm wondering, if I may ask the sponsor just one more question, if that alley that connects to the bull cart trail is the access for that adjacent property owner in the back? Because I don't see their access.
Yes, it is, Madam Speaker.
The alley is?
Not the alley that's the subject for the sale. It's the alley that's to the east of lot 1004.
Okay.
So what's not shown here is the lots to the east of 1004 and 1005. If you take a quick look at the colored aerial, you'll see that there is a alleyway out to the beach.
All right, great. So there's another alleyway that services that area? All right, then that's good to know. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. On the main motion, Senator Rodriguez, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this bill. I really was not intending to speak on the bill. I've supported being consistent with the other efforts of this body to do similar transactions such as these. But I rise because some of the comments that have been stated on this floor concerns me. Just because this bill is being introduced and been put on the floor by a member that may not be here next term does not make it, shouldn't make it appear that this is something that is being rushed and dragged through the legislative process. And just because this piece of legislation may benefit just one property owner, one family, doesn't mean that it's bad. It's bad for the people of Guam, or it's not fair. When we talk about our priorities are addressing the lands of our people whose land's been taken twice, first by the federal government and then by our own government, and we don't do anything here, even though there was a bill that was introduced last term and it didn't go anywhere. A bill introduced this term and it's sat in committee up to this day, a bill 110-34. It's hard for me to sit down and keep quiet and not speak up on this. And so, please, for our members who may be thinking about this and listening to sometimes the unspoken words of perhaps this is some special interest, this is going to benefit one family and it's bad, we have to look deep down and see this could be an injustice for this one property. I'm not, I don't know the exact details, but from what I've read and what I've heard, this is something that must be done, and so we have to be very cautious in the way we approach these things, and sometimes some of these assumptions that are being put out there could very well be damaging for some people. And so I caution our colleagues to please take a deep look at some of the statements that are being made, and I support this measure. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Such response, Senator Rodriguez. On the main motion, any other member wish to be heard? If not, we'll invite Senator Ada to close on Bill 369.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to just address some of the comments that have been made. One of the colleagues indicated that, you know, we should be looking further down the road and how is this sale going to impact the future generation. And I'm happy to say that when I was putting together this bill and working with the landowner, I was looking at it from the standpoint not so much of how they're going to benefit from it. That was a secondary concern for me. The primary concern for me was generating revenues for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. There's the future generation. The people who are eligible for the Chamorro Land Trust properties are the people that we should be helping. They're the important ones. Now, it's ironic, it's unfortunate that during these past couple of years, there was a number of bills that I had introduced that had sold bull cart trails and whatnot so that we can put money into the Chamorro Land Trust Survey and Infrastructure Fund, only to wake up one morning and find out that this administration drained the account for other uses. And, but, you know, to say that we need to think about the impact on the future generation, okay, well, which generation are we talking about? Because I'm looking at the future generation of those Chamorro Land Trust holders. And they're never going to get on that land if we don't survey the properties. We're talking about giving away property for a steal. Well, that's not the case. The law is in place, which establishes how these properties are to be evaluated, and we've been following that. And, you know, I guess that's the fairest way, but to say that we've been giving it away at a steal is really unfair, because that's not the case. So, you know, now I'll tell you, if that's just not the case. The concern was raised also about, well, what about the adjacent landowners? Were they told that De La Corte Street was being put up for sale? No, we did not go to see who owned lot 1004 and 1005, because there's enough other interests already, and quite frankly, that's what we attended to. And so, for sure, if those adjacent landowners want to get a piece of that old alleyway in the street, well, the land committee certainly would have sat down with them. For sure, with the enactment of this bill, it's going to put an injection of about $120,000 into the Chamorro Land Trust's Survey and Infrastructure Fund. And that could certainly go a long ways in surveying a lot of Chamorro Land Trust properties. The comment was made that this bill is being treated like it was a priority at the closing session. Well, it just so happens, first of all, I can't help it if you know, you're not able to introduce bills. But it has, unfortunately, it came to this point because a lot of time and effort was put into researching the bill and making sure that we come to this session hall with the correct information, and making sure that everybody can understand what the transaction is about. And so, Madam Speaker, you know, I think that what we have here is fair to everyone, to the person who wants to buy that property so that they can consolidate the property that they have and be able to do the sort of things that their business plan, that they have in their business plans. And I think it's a win-win because it also generates revenues for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission to be able to move those properties further in the next process so that we can issue the properties to our qualified Chamorro Land Trust applicants. So I would ask my colleagues to look at it from that perspective, that yes, there is a view to how it's impacting the future generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Ada. On the motion to send the bill down to the third reading, any member wish to be, I apologize. On the motion, any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. We'll take a 1-minute recess.
This Committee of the Whole will come to order. We will be discussing Bill 350-34 COR as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication. It's an act to provide an annual continuing appropriation from the Recycling Revolving Fund to provide payment for a prior year obligation resulting from a 2001 lease agreement executed by the Chamorro Land Trust Commission for 25,000 metric tons of metallic and other waste removal from the island of Guam, and also approving and authorizing the CLTC to make amendments to the 2001 license agreement. Now, before we begin, there are four very essential individuals that need to be here. One of them is the Executive Director for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, Mr. Mike Bora, and he is here. We also need the Administrator for the Guam Environmental Protection Agency, because the funds for this recurring payment is proposed to come from the Recycling Revolving Fund. Unfortunately, the Administrator for EPA is not here yet. The third individual that's crucial to this hearing is the Attorney General's office, because they have provided testimony in opposition to the bill, and so we need his input here. And finally, and unfortunately he's not here yet, we also have the attorney for Cocoa Recycling, the entity that's, that performed this work in the past and has not been compensated. And he is represented, Cocoa Recycling is represented by Attorney Horeki. He is here. So until the EPA Administrator and the Attorney General a representative is here, we will have to recess until they arrive. we return to the committee of the whole. We're gonna, because a couple of the critical personnel that we need to get on the panel still have not arrived, we're going to suspend the discussions of this committee of the whole, and we're gonna rise so that we can then attend to other bills, and then we will return back to the committee of the whole tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. to resume discussions on Bill 350-34. So with that, we're in recess. The committee of the whole will, oh, so can I get a motion? All right. To suspend discussion until, and we'll rise until tomorrow morning, yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to suspend discussion on committee of the whole and rise from the committee of the whole, and we will execute that tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
Okay.
Ms.
All right. Does it need a second, right?
Could we take that as two separate motions? One to rise and then one to recess?
One is to suspend it. Well, we want to suspend the discussion in the committee of the whole.
Correct.
And rise so that we can continue with the business that's still on the second reading.
And okay, so
and then we will return, and we'll go for as long as the body wishes to go, and then tomorrow morning we will resume at 10 a.m.
for the committee of the whole.
To resume discussions in the committee of the whole.
Correct. I just wanted to make sure because I heard recess.
Oh well, I made
Okay.
the wrong. Okay.
All right. Because I think there's still bills we could probably get through tonight.
Right.
All right.
Okay. All right. So. Okay, so we're going to rise then and resume with what's on the second reading.
We are back in second reading. We are on Bill 370. Senator Atta, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 370-34 COR as introduced into the third reading, and I'd like to speak on it.
Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, Bill 370 is a bill that proposes to authorize the mayor of PD to enter into a commercial lease agreement with the Guam Telephone Authority for the use of Lot 5 new -R1 Block 2 Municipality of PD. And so what's being passed around now is this colored graphic, and as you look at it, it shows Lot A and Lot B. So the lot that's to be entered into with a commercial lease is Lot B. So right now GTA is leasing Lot A, and would like to expand over into Lot B in order to get ready for additional telecommunication services that is to be provided. Lot B, for the longest time, I believe for the last, I forget exactly, I believe it was in 1997, almost 20 years ago, Lot B was placed under the jurisdiction of the mayor of PD. And when it was given to the mayor of PD, It was for the purpose of building a multi-purpose facility there for that particular village. And the funding source for that facility was supposed to come from the underwater observatory. Would have given them sufficient funds to build the facility that they had planned. Unfortunately, again, on the way to the forum, the money that was supposed to come to the PD village got diverted. And so the PD village, PD mayor's office, and the municipal planning council really never received the benefits of that. And so for the last 20 years, nothing has really happened on that lot, except for when you drive down there, you'll see a basketball court, which one of the local companies, one of the local power companies, put some money into it and refurbished the basketball court. Well, GTA is proposing that as it enters into a lease agreement with the PD mayor and the municipal planning council, is on the lot in the back, behind just south of Lot B, is additional government land, and that is where they would be able to build their senior center and be able to build a basketball court. And GTA, as a lessee, has, during the public hearing, has indicated that they will do that in addition to paying the annual rent on the property. They would construct and maintain a basketball court there. I believe the anticipated annual rent on this property that will be going to the PD Municipal Planning Council is approximately, based on the appraisal, I believe is around something at the order of about $16,000 a year. And in the bill, it provides for escalators. You will see on page 2 that the rent shall escalate 8% every 5 years based on from the previous amount. And so then with those proceeds, then of course the village of PD can go ahead and use those funds to build other facilities. On top of that, the Guam Telephone Authority, as the prospective lessee, is also offered to provide internet services at the nearby Rios Elementary School. So they're trying to be a good business partner to the village, and then also to provide them a stream of revenues. Now, for PD, this of course will provide them a source of revenue to develop some of their facilities in the village. Dedido and Jigo, their source of revenue is from the buffer strip that is being leased out by the businesses there, like J&G Payless, the gas stations there. They're paying for that, and that money is being paid into an account for the use of those two municipalities. You know, this is a win-win situation for the village of PD, as well as for GTA, as it gets ready to meet the challenges of the coming years with respect to telecommunications. So I ask my colleagues to favorably consider Bill 370. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On Bill 370, is there any member who would like to be recognized? 370. Senator Torres, you are recognized.
If I may propose an inquiry to the mover of this bill. if you'll so yield. In the legislative findings and intent, there's a statement that a previous attempt to provide funds for community use under the Fisheye Marine Park lease has not accrued to the benefit of the community of Petey. My question is, if in a prior leasing scheme it has turned up to be a bust, how do they perceive that this is not going to result in similar disadvantage to the village of Petey? It was stated there, and I find it a little curious that it was stated in the legislative findings and intent where one failed, this is advantageous. And what is the rationale for having to draw that comparison, if the author may so yield? Senator Atta, do you yield?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I don't know back then how things were set up, but I think over the years the municipalities have gotten smarter about it. Take, for example, the Community Host Fund for the villages of Inarahan and Jigo. So that has been set up so that when the revenue as the income is generated, it goes directly into the account that was set up for the recipient. And so, you know, it doesn't go into the big black hole and the cash gets replaced with IOU. So that is something that, although we don't mention it here in the bill, that is something that is going to have to be set up so that it goes directly into the municipality and it's not, you know, the cash is not exchanged for some IOU document. So but you know, we say clearly there on page 2, section 5, that the funds generated from this lease shall be deposited with the office of the mayor of PD as determined, and for the use of the community as determined by the mayor and the municipal planning council. So, you know, are they going to be taken for a ride again a second time? I hope not. I don't think they will. At least not in the...
Senator Torres.
I want to thank the author for yielding to my question. I suppose in looking at page 2, lines 6 to 7, the fact that there is an anticipated escalation in rent every 5 years at 8% does contemplate that it's not going to be a stagnant type of arrangement whereby the lessees will benefit disproportionately to the community of Petey. So I think that just looking at that language perhaps is a good faith effort towards ensuring that the revenues received to Petey are at least on an escalated basis over the course of 50 years. So I think that I'm satisfied. I just found that the insert of that language, that there was a failure in part previously as setting the groundworks for justifying this bill, was a little odd, but perhaps it was just that. It was just an odd mention. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, Senator Esteves, you are recognized.
Just a point of information, Madam Speaker. I did inquire about a similar question in discussions with the PD mayor about that. And one of the things that came up was the use of the fisheye. But just to share the information with my colleagues, it's important to understand there's two aspects to that. So the building and structure itself on the side of the road is private property. The difficulty with enforcement or with any community contribution is that the water and the beach, the shore, is not under the municipal control and can't be under the municipal control of PD. So there's a big difference. One is in the water, and one is on land. So land, of which with this particular bill, which we've given administrative jurisdiction to the PD mayor, is actually something that can enter into agreement because they have the authority to do so. However, there are many restrictions on what we can do in terms of controlling what happens on the beaches and within the waters. And so that was actually the disparity between what happened with the previous deal under fisheye versus what's going on now. And I just hope that information that I was able to come up with would be benefit to my colleagues on their deliberation. But while I'm up here, Madam Speaker, I'd like to just say I do support this bill. I think it's a good use of the property. PD has historically had a good relationship with that landing site for telecommunications. It's what built that park there previously. And so I think this is just in keeping with the previous work on that particular landing with regard to telecommunication for providing a direct benefit to the community in which this asset exists for them. So I rise in support of this measure.
On the bill, is there any member who would like to be recognized?
Madam Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. I rise in support of the bill. I would just like to, I guess, inquire and point out a couple things and try one amendment on this bill. The author is correct that the mayor of PD, when testifying on this bill, had indicated that there were other things not in the bill. For example, the bill states what the rental will be and for the term of 20 years, but it doesn't state the other, I guess, benefits that the community of PD would be receiving based on the agreement between the mayor and GTA. And so, but the bill does say that the bill does simply authorize the mayor of PD to lease to GTA the lot for the average of 2 appraisals and, oh, wait a minute. Now this says for 50 years. Okay. I would, first of all, amend this to 20, try to make an amendment to change the 50 to 20 years to make it consistent with the other lease agreements that have been put in place. Prior to this, this is a proposal to lease a lot adjacent to land that GTA is currently leasing that it operates out of right now in PD. So they want to lease the adjacent lot. But prior to this, GTA already has a license with the Chamorro Land Trust beginning in 2016 for the submerged lands off of Santos Park. And so they entered into a license with them for approximately $5,000 a year with increases, I think every 5 years. And I think the term of that submerged license was for 20 years with possible renewal. And so I would, and then for the period, I guess, of while they were making the improvements on the reef, or you know, for the submerged cables, that they had also made agreement to take care of the park, that the Santos Park, where the submerged cables meet the land, and other things. If I may just read from this license. So this was the original license, and it says, for the purpose of constructing, installing, and maintaining conduits and the landing of undersea cables, this following described real property, which is a 6-foot wide by 560-foot section of the Tempugan Reef Flat adjacent to and abutting Pedro C. Santos Memorial Park. And then it gives the legal description. And it gives the terms of this license are that the conduits shall be buried. General public shall have the continuing right to use the reef flat and to enter on or cross any portion of the licensed property for fishing and other recreational purposes. Licensor reserves the right to itself and to the agents and representatives of the government of Guam to enter on and cross any portion of the licensed property for the purpose of performing any public or official duties, provided, however, that in the exercise of such rights, licensor and the general public shall not unreasonably interfere with the licensee's use and enjoyment of the rights guaranteed by this agreement. It further goes on to limit the purpose for the license that may be occupied and used solely for the activities proposed by licensee and for incidental purposes related to the landing of undersea cables. In no event shall licensee conduct any activity on the licensed property without obtaining all requisite authorizations and permits from the appropriate Guam and federal government agencies. Licensee shall comply with all requirements of permits and other things. And so this term was for 20 years, ending from 2016 to 2036. $5,000 per year with increases of 10% every 5 years. And then a reevaluation after it will be an assessment of the fair market value shall be conducted prior to the end of the 5th year, and compensation rate will be reevaluated and then increases after that new rate 5 years later. And so this, and then the agreement that they made, they ran the undersea cables, of course, this with the licensed property, and then they made an agreement with the mayor of PD at the time to use Santos Park to, well, for a limited time, to bury those cables going through the park and then going underneath Route 1 across the street, which is where GTA's leased premises are. So they're across the street from Santos Park, across Route 1. And so in that agreement, and in one of these agreements, I think it's this one, they had I think as the author said earlier, they had made an agreement with the mayor that in addition to the rent, they were going to provide internet services and other services, kind of in-kind services that come from GTA. And so I have no objection to those additional type of services, but they're just not stated in the bill. So, but I was going to ask for two things. If we could limit this lease to a period of 20 years instead of 50 years to be consistent with that undersea cable license agreement. So that would be my first amendment, Madam Speaker. That would be on page 2, line 1.
Clerks, can you please read the amendment?
Amendment is just to change the word 50 and the number 50 to 20 on page 2, line 1.
Clerks will read the amendment that Speaker Talahi has proffered.
On page 2, line 1, 182 plus or minus square meters for a period of 20 years.
Thank you. Anyone on the amendment? Senator Ada?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to make an amendment to the amendment so that it reads for a period of 20 years and then add the phrase with an option to renew for an additional 20 years. So at least we can, at that point, come back and everybody sit down and see whether she will continue the relationship. So that would be my amendment to the amendment.
There has been an amendment to the amendment by Senator Atta. Clerks, can you please read the amendment to the amendment?
Page 2, line 1, 182 plus or minus square meters for a period of 50 years with an option to renew for an additional 20 years.
It would read for a period of 20 years with an option to renew for an additional 20 years.
So the amendment to the amendment is that it would be for 20 years with an option to renew for an additional 20 years. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection on the amendment? Amendment passes. Now we move to the original amendment. Any discussion on the original amendment, which will now read, can you clarify, clerk? Which will now read 2,182 plus or minus square meters for a period of 20 years with an option to renew for an additional 20 years. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objection to the amendment? No objection? Amendment passes. Any discussion on Bill 37-34? Speaker Tilahi,
if I may continue, Madam Speaker, just shortly. Yes, I would also like on page 2, line 3, to revisit the rental amount. It says it would be determined by the average of 2 appraisals selected and paid for by GTA. I'm not sure if those are in our packets. I didn't see them, but I trust that they are available. I would ask that the word average be amended to read the highest, and this is with the understanding that the GTA has indicated also as part of their testimony that they have agreed to other things in addition to rent, and I still believe that getting the highest appraisal value on the rent would be a fair deal for the government, and especially with these additional items that they have promised to the Village of PD and the Mayor's office. So that would be my amendment. It's just that one word, the highest,
Page 2,
the
line
average.
3?
Yes, line 3. Change the word average to the word highest.
Okay.
Thank you.
There has been an amendment on page 2, line 3, where the word average will be crossed out and it would be replaced by the word highest. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objections? Is an objection on the amendment? Call for a vote. All those in favor to change on page 2, line 3, the word average, cross it out to replace it with the word highest. Please raise your hand. Amendment passes. Speaker Tilahi, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my colleagues for those amendments. And yeah, I just want to point out that there were several debates as part of the election that we just went through, and not just for us, but for the gubernatorial teams, where they talked a lot about, you know, technology and us being the hub for these undersea cables. And I commend GTA and, you know, the other companies for the work that they are doing, UOG for its work that it is doing to make Guam the hub and to ensure those deals. But I guess I just want to point out and hope that this is something that we can review and create a bigger policy on, that the government of Guam, I feel like, should have a team that is negotiating these deals for it regarding submerged land, regarding use of land for this type of industry, if this is going to be, as people have promised, you know, the way of the future, and a really one of the important industries that Guam can benefit from its location. And so I just feel like I would like these to be negotiated, you know, as part of a big picture, as part of a benefit for the entire island. And so I know that there were some agreements already in place, but going forward, I'm hoping that we can catch those and make those all part of a bigger policy for the government of Guam. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Speaker Talahi. Any other senator on the bill? If not, Senator Atta, you're welcome to close. The bill will be moved into the third reading file. On the motion to place bill number 360-34, correction 370-34 into third reading file. Any objections? No objections. Bill will move to the third reading file. Okay. My bill is next. We just need a quick 5-minute recess for the clerks to reset some of the technical aspects of the programs that they're using. So just a quick 5-minute recess.